and welcome to Talking F1. We're a podcast from Grand Prix Grandstand that does more or less what that title says. We talk about F1. More specifically, we talk about Formula All. That means Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and the W Series. I'm your host, Jim Kimberley, and today I'm joined by Thiemo Albers-Daly and Jacob Phillips. And I'm also delighted to say that we have Fraser Ford joining us this week. And you can usually find Fraser in his natural environment of hosting a podcast like myself over with our friends at Inside F2. But in the podcast equivalent of spinning the camera, focus around, we get to hear from the man himself. How are you, Fraser?
Yeah, I'm really good. Yeah, thanks for having me. The sun's out, the weather's good. I'm on holiday, well, annual leave at the moment, so I'm loving life at the moment. So yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. And as you can tell, everybody listening and watching, Fraser has got annual leave and he wants to spend time with us, which shows the priorities he's got in the right order.
Exactly.
And I suppose I need to ask you this, motley crew, how are you both doing, Jacob and Thiemo?
Not too shabby, thanks. Yourself?
Yes, not so bad. And I know, Jacob, you felt better after a bit of a session last night?
I have felt better, but there's no better way to recover than talking F1 with you boys.
What a professional. Well, this week we are going to be talking F1 about one topic, and that is the Driver Academies. So we're now in a world where the only ways to really get into Formula One is through a driver academy or to pay for a seat. So if you consider some of the recent drivers that have graduated through, and this season, let's focus. We've got Mick Schumacher, who's associated with Ferrari. We've got Yuki Tsunoda, who's associated with Red Bull. And we've got Nikita Mazepin, who's associated with money. And if you go before that as well, Latifi, a recent graduate, again, with sponsorship and money, getting his way through. And before that, still George Russell with Mercedes, Lando Norris with McLaren, and Alex Albon with Red Bull. So it really does seem that Formula One now is going into the route of you need to be part of a junior program to get there. So what we thought we'd do for today is to have a look at the driver programs that are currently existing for 2021 and figure out if we can rank them. So really, Fraser, I'll start with you because I want to hear your opinions rather than be a host for once. In your opinion, best driver academy out there? And we'll go for all the drivers in a bit, but who do you think is the strongest one we've got?
Yeah, listen, there's some really good ones. I think Red Bull historically have had the best driver academy. They've brought some really good talents through, obviously Max Verstappen, Alex Albon's the most recent, for example. But you know, I think right now Ferrari have got a very strong junior academy. I know you said we're going to talk about drivers in a minute, but I think Mick Schumacher, very strong driver. I think Robert Schwartzman in Formula 2, yeah, he hasn't had the best start to the season, but I still think he's a brilliant driver. And I think that, you know, he's going to come good this season. I still think that. I know a lot of people have written him off for the title already, but, you know, in Formula 2, you're only 2 weekends away from being a title contender again. So, yeah, definitely some strong drivers there. Obviously, we can't not talk about the Alpine Junior Academy. Some brilliant drivers in there. Oscar Piastri steps up from Formula 3 up to Formula 2. And it seems effortlessly, doesn't it? He's just slotted straight in and he's doing really, really well. Guan Yu Zhou, top of the stands after 2 rounds, obviously very, very strong. And I don't think Christian Lungard has quite got into the flow of things yet. Obviously, not a great start to the season. I think he'll be a little bit disappointed after 2 rounds. But he again, another really strong driver. He showed that in Formula 3. So yeah, there's some really, really strong academies out there at the moment, and I'm really looking forward to discussing this because there's as I said, some really strong academies out there. So
yeah, I really think it's a different sort of team battle, isn't it? So you go into Formula 2 and Formula 3 and you think he's going to be Virtuosi or Prema or ART or Dams or somebody who could win the championship. But you've also got this sub-championship almost where the drivers that we saw in Bahrain in Formula 2, where the Alpine drivers just dominated, didn't they? And they just seemed to be really strong, running 1, 2 and 3 at one point. Jacob, any quick thoughts from you on who the top academy currently is?
Like Fraser said, if you think historically, you know, and when you think driver academies, you know, the first academy that springs to mind is, you know, the Red Bull Junior program. You know, the amount of drivers that have chopped and changed for that, you know, the endless names, it could be a forever name all of those. Currently, though, I think that Ferrari have sort of stolen that baton a little bit. I think Ferrari is currently got the best driver academy and the up-and-coming driver academy. You know, it's really surprising. There's some great talents in there as well, which we'll come on to in a bit. I think the Alpine Academy is really one to watch out for.
Yeah, I think the Alpine one is very strong. And Thiemo, how about yourself? Number 1 academy right now?
I'm going to have to take a slightly different line to the previous 2 chats just because they're all great junior teams and junior drivers and everything. I'm not going to disagree about that. But in terms of effectiveness and getting bums in seats in F1, which is the end game, I'm thinking Mercedes, just because they've got two drivers, and it's as nice as it is to have like 4 or 6 in some of the cases. The other ones, where are you going to put them all? You've got to chop and change, and it's good to have spares if you're Red Bull, because we know Helmut Marko's not exactly a merciful man when it comes to junior drivers. But in terms of realistically making the jump then from F3, F2 into F1, Mercedes seem to have that at the moment. They've got George Russell, obviously, who's gone to Williams, and they're grooming him a bit for Mercedes next year by the look of things. And then you've got Vesti in F3 at the moment, where they can take their time with him. And then, say, if Hamilton retires in a couple of years, by that point, Vesti might be up into F1, whereas some of the drivers in Red Bull and Ferrari driver academies, I mean, there might be like a Callum Milo situation. You get to be a test driver, but that's not quite what you're there for at the end of the day. So it's a tricky one, because they're all great, but I think in terms of end result, Mercedes at the moment.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I guess what we're trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, is try and rank the driver academies, but it's very difficult to actually substantiate what ranking would be, because if you looked at it from perspective of which driver academy would you want to be part of, Red Bull, you really got the chance and they'll give you the financial backing, but then you've got the difficulty of actually making that jump and seeing how ruthless they are. Whereas you make a very good point, Thiemo, you go from Mercedes, they are focusing on you almost exclusively in Vesti's case. I know Russell's already made it to F1 and has made his name for himself. And then you've got Alpine, who seem to have a really strong academy. You've got seemingly really strong links of various teams, but they don't have the seats available for the drivers who get there. So I really don't know. And gentlemen, please jump in and say how we should rank this. How are we going to rank these things, these driver academies? Because if you think of it from Sauber's perspective, who got Thiemo Albers-Daly by himself, that's great. If you were Thiemo, I've got this maybe fast track to Formula One, whereas Red Bull, you have to get your elbows out and say, no, I'm better than Lawson, I'm better than Vips, I'm better than De Ruyveler. And it's a bit of a battle. So how do we best, I'm going to actually go bully you, Fraser, you're the external party. How do we best rank these academies?
It's really difficult, isn't it? Because I think structurally, Red Bull and Ferrari have probably got it spot on in that realistically they've got 3 or 4 seats where they if you do have a driver that does really well in Formula 2, you can bring them up into Formula 1, and they've got the seats available. You look at Alpine, for example, don't have the seats available, only have 2 seats. If Guan Yu Zhou wins the championship this season, if Oscar Piastri wins the championship this season, and he's won Formula 3, Formula 2 back to back, are they really going to drop 2-time world champion Fernando Alonso, for example, or Esteban Ocon? I mean, Esteban Ocon is outperforming Fernando Alonso at the moment. So which one of those are you going to drop? And if that isn't the case, you've got a back-to-back Formula 3, Formula 2 winner who probably can't do anything more than what he's doing at the moment, who hasn't got a seat. So it's really difficult. I think structurally, as I said, Red Bull and Ferrari have got it spot on. If we're talking in terms of drivers and just basing this on drivers, then yeah, as Jacob said, you'd have to say that Ferrari and Alpine are in a really strong position. They've got some really good drivers.
Yeah, so the real question I think we've got here, chaps, is do we want to look at this from a perspective of who's the best academy and who's the worst academy, in perspective of being Toto Wolff or Christian Horner looking to cherry pick the best from the various drivers? Or do you want to look at this from the perspective of being a driver choosing an academy to be in? Thiemo?
It's a kind of double-edged sword, because you could do both and they'd both be correct and wrong at the same time. Because if you're Christian Horner, you've got so many people to choose from. But as a driver, there's so much pressure on you, because if you make one mistake, you can be replaced immediately. Whereas if you're in the Sauber or Mercedes Junior Driver Academy, they're more likely to spend more time with you, developing you as a driver. I mean, I can't remember if he started out as part of the driver program or not, but if you take Giovinazzi, he's had a couple of seasons getting up to speed, and now he seems to be making some decent progress this year, given the car he's got. And I think Vasseur was saying today or yesterday that he expects him to be leading the team soon. What that means for Kimi, we don't know. But I mean, realistically, I don't expect him to be there next year. Granted, we said that last year, but at some point we'll be right. And you've got to think, if Thiemo has a top 3 finish this year in F2, there's no reason why they couldn't bring him up into there and develop him a little bit, or they've got the choice to do that with only the one driver, and they know that they can do that. Whereas so from a driver perspective, there it's perfect, and from a team principal perspective, it's perfect as well, because you've got less to focus on, and you can and less to focus on, but you've got the quality there rather than quantity, and you know that if there's going to be a couple of mistakes, it's all right. It's a low pressure. There's less pressure to it because you're starting out. Whereas if you're a rookie at Red Bull, even if you're in the AlphaTauri, I mean, just look at Albon and Gasly in 2019. It was just all over the place, and you wouldn't really want to be either of them in that year, because it didn't work out too well regardless. And then you look at 2020 again, it was weird that Gasly was feeling more at home in an AlphaTauri than in a Red Bull, because there's just less pressure to it. But even then, you think, would he go back to Red Bull now? It's such a mess there, because the pressure of just making one mistake. I mean, you hear what Marco says about Yuki already, and it's just like, calm down. We're not even a quarter of the way through the season yet. So if you're in a Driver Academy where there's less drivers about, it just seems better. I don't know if I'm answering the question or not there, but there's no definitive answer, I feel like.
I totally understand what you're saying, though. And Jacob, is this a thing then, that these academies, say Mercedes and Sauber, who just going for one driver, is doing that approach way too risky? If you were running those academies, would you prefer actually to have a whole stable of drivers that you think, one of these probably will do all right? Or is Thiebo's example of Red Bull getting to the point where Gasly and Albon didn't quite make that step up as quick as possible? Is that almost a problem because they've got so many drivers, they're going to get a whole bunch of good rather than excellent ones?
I think certainly from a driver's perspective, you'd much rather be in that position, say, for example, Pourchaire, where he's got no competition. So if, for example, if someone drops down, like, for example, Raikkonen, when he finally hopefully retires soon, Pourchaire's first in line and there's no real competition. It's the same with Vesti and Russell. Russell's already proved himself in F1 and has done for 3 years now. But if, for example, Pourchaire, makes advancements and then not good enough, or like even Vesti or Russell, for example, then they have to, put money, time, and, another 3 years probably development, and the amount of money it will cost to find another driver lower down the program. Where, for example, Helmut Marko could be like, I like you, but, and we know how ruthless Red Bull have been as well. He's not afraid to cut them at a moment's notice. So I think certainly from a team's perspective, you'd much rather be Helmut Marko. But, Mercedes have also got the money as well, whereby if, for example, Vesti wasn't good enough, they'd just buy someone on the current field anyway.
Just one last thing, though. I was just going to say, if you're Mercedes or Sauber and you've only got one or two drivers that you're focusing on, even if it turns out that you made a mistake in choosing the driver, you can rely on all the other driver academies out there that if they get treated a bit badly, you just have a sniff over there. Oh, Mr. Calamine, you don't have a seat. Would you like to have a go in a Williams, maybe? Or would you like something there? But if you're the Mercedes people, if you have, say, Lawson and Crawford and a couple of others there looking at seats for F1, and Marco does what Marco does, then if you're Toto Wolff, you're thinking, well, there's a perfectly good driver there. You just need to have a bit of patience rather than just expecting results day one. Because not every driver can be a Vettel or a Max Verstappen. You got to be a bit patient, which he doesn't seem to have too much of that with the younger drivers. Then you could just pinch them, and you have to do less work there, and you've saved yourself a whole lot of money in the process because Red Bull's already done all the hard work for you.
It's one of the, I think Helmut Marko wouldn't work in a Mercedes Academy, for example. Helmut Marko can chop and change as much as he likes because the Red Bull Academy is so big. Whereas, for example, if he was, running the Mercedes Academy and they only have, as you say, George Russell and Frederick Vesti, he wouldn't be able to cut them like he does because, it just wouldn't work. You wouldn't have anyone. So what I think is really interesting, though, so, for example, if Thiemo Pourchaire does really well this season and Mercedes are looking at him thinking, okay, we like the look of Thiemo Pourchaire, could they offer him? I mean, I think Thiemo Pourchaire would fancy, if Mercedes offered him coming across to their academy, would he take that? I think he'd fancy that, moving across from Sauber. And could they place him in a Williams next year? If George Russell, for example, is going to be in a Mercedes, like I think a lot of people are expecting, could they put Thiemo Pourchaire in a Williams next season? I think it's too soon for Frederick Vesti, for example. Probably needs another season. It depends how he's doing in Formula 3 this season. If he does well, then we'll need a season in Formula 2. But if Mercedes are to have a look at Thiemo Pourchaire, and they haven't got anyone in Formula 2 at the moment, if George Russell does move on, Frederick Vesti is next in line. So would they fancy a Formula 2 driver who is going to give them another option. Théo Pourchaire is probably the best option at the moment in terms of someone that's not at Red Bull, Ferrari and Alpine. So could they put him in a Williams next season if he does well? I don't know.
So just going off though, I was just looking at the Williams Driver Academy there, and realistically, I mean, I know we've only just got Aitken back in the F2 season, but we don't know how long that's necessarily going to be for yet. So it doesn't look too great for him stepping up, even though he got there last year for a race. It must be very annoying if you're him, but you got to think Dan Ticktum, he's been around too long. Realistically, shouldn't make it. Nissany, I'll let Jim deal with that one. And Jamie Chadwick, I mean, it would be great to see her in there, but at the same time, you think there's one in four that would have a realistic chance there. And if you're Pourchaire, you think, well, that's still only one person to compete against, which is it's better than still being an Alpine, Ferrari, or Red Bull. So, I mean, you've still got two great drivers to choose from there and see what happens. So it's I think Fraser's onto something there. Could be something to watch out for next year.
It's one of these weird ones, though, isn't it? Because you've got Williams, like you say, that if Williams were to do that, and it would be from some sort of discount, presumably with the engines from Mercedes, or however they were to work this stuff out, and Mercedes place drivers into the Williams team. What does that do to the other drivers if that was to be a thing? That what would Ticktum, and Thiemo, I'd actually argue against, so that Ticktum's got a bit of a reputation, but he's mellowed down a little bit from what we've seen so far this season, and we're recording this.
I feel like it's still too little too late, though, you know?
We'll see, but he's definitely got some speed, right? So that's the thing. He's not a slow driver. So for them to go and then go external, it's a weird situation that we've got right now, that you've got too many. It's always been a problem with Formula One. You've got too many drivers who want to get not enough seats. And if that were to be a thing, like we've seen with, in my opinion at the time, Giovinazzi and Raikkonen having the edge over Eilert, who was at the time when these things were getting announced, was looking that he was going to be potentially even winning the championship. It's a rough situation. It's a really dog-eat-dog world. And we've got the case, like we've seen drivers before, like Nick de Vries, not make it to do that final step. And that could be something realistically we could see with Alpine this season for the way the championship's going. Joe is extending his lead when I say we're recording this at the end of May.
You almost don't want to win the F2 championship.
Yeah, but if he wasn't to win it, what they're going to do is keep him in F2 for forever until Alonso doesn't want to play ball.
I think for Alpine, it's a difficult one. I think they're probably sitting there thinking, we hope. I don't know. Maybe they're hoping that Oscar Piastri doesn't win the championship this season, because I think that's a more difficult situation than if Guan Yu Zhou wins the championship. He's had 3 seasons in Formula 2, and maybe you could almost not use that as an excuse, but say, well, if he wanted to be in the seat, he should have done it earlier. But if Oscar Piastri goes and wins Formula 3, as we said, back to back with Formula 2, it's really, really difficult. And if he's the man they want to, replace Alonso, if Alonso is only going to do 2 years in Formula 1, then another season, finishing inside the top 3 this year, for example, and doing another season next year and potentially winning the championship next year, then putting him into the seat to replace Alonso, that probably works out better for them. So I kind of feel like that they'd be hoping that Oscar Piastri doesn't win the championship this season.
It's almost a situation of you're a bit screwed regardless if you're in Alpine at the moment, because Ocon's outperforming Alonso, but you can't get rid of Alonso because you think, well, give him a chance to get back up. But then again, he had his chance and he's had a nice long career already. But then Joe's were like, well, come on, I've been waiting and I'm delivering the goods now. And then Piastri's there, well, I'm also here for God's sake.
Well, Jacob, do you want to jump in and remember or remind us that we've got Christian Lungard also possibly in there? He's been terribly unlucky so far in the season.
Yeah, Lungard's been very unlucky, and I do feel a little bit sorry for him with his luck in Monaco, but I certainly thought he'd be higher up the championship. But, now Piastri's performing and Guan Yu Zhou's leading the championship, he's 3rd in line. And obviously there's also pressure. We're thinking about the F3 drivers as well. You've got Colette coming up and Victor Martin, so we really can't forget them. So if I was in Alpine right now, the pressure's really, really on. And they've got, to be fair, they've got a nice problem to have, I'd call it. They've got 5 drivers there, but it's also going to be very hard, like it's been said many, many times before on this podcast today, you can't just bump off Alonso. He's signed a 2-year deal. It's going to be very, very hard to get rid of him. And Ocon, to be fair to him, is really performing. I think he's performing better than I thought he would. So, but yeah, Lungard for me, I think, to be honest, I'm going to say it's probably going to be too late for him now. He's probably not going to win the championship this year, and even if he does, it might just be a case of, like Guan Yu Zhou that Fraser said, he's had Is second? Would this be his third year in F2? I think.
Second for Lungard, yeah.
Second for Lungard. Okay, well, yeah, I think it might be a case of, once again, too little too late for Lungard.
I think you definitely would prefer to be in the Alpine Academy, though, over if we're trying to find a way to rank them. I still think you'd rather be in there than in, say, Red Bull, because or Williams for that matter, because at least you're getting encouragement to try and do the best, and they're not trying. They're like the seats may not be there yet, but they're still trying to. They're still trying to work out that problem. Whereas if they try and get you up there, they're not going to cut you immediately if you don't perform on the day. Whereas I think it's just nice not having a Helmut Marko in your team. I know I keep banging on about it, but it annoys me how he treats some of the drivers coming through, because you want to give them 5 minutes. It's just a shame, because you wonder, is Alex Albon ever going to come back to F1, because he's just had a crazy couple of years and now he's off doing DTM, which DTM lovely and everything, but probably not his plan in the beginning, was it?
No, same with Ilott as well, isn't it, with the GT racing that he's been doing. You see these sorts of weird things. So when I first looked at the academies, and maybe this is a way to rank them, we looked at it from the observer's point of view here, really, who's got the strongest academy. And I do think my shout was Alpine straight away. Those drivers they've got, and we're looking at F1.
Definitely based off this season.
Yeah, this season, definitely. So for 2021, and we could do the same thing next year and have a completely different answer. So this time last year, you'd be probably looking at Ferrari and thinking, well, yeah, Schumacher and Schwartzman, this is a really strong lineup there, and Ilott. They were just taking Formula 2 by storm. But this year, it seems to be Alpine. And it's a weird season that one weekend can completely change everything out. But from my perspective, looking at Alpine's drivers in the Driver Academy, that is the strongest academy right now, and it's not the biggest one. Red Bull have that completely cornered, and I think they will do for a while. But would we all say, because I saw some nods there for people who aren't watching on YouTube, that Alpine are probably the best academy for 2021?
So far, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so, Jim.
Yeah, I'd agree so as well. They're top two in the F2 Championship, obviously Guan Yu Zhou and Castri. And I think they harbour the most titles at a junior level as well. They might share that with, I think they have 4 titles in their rank. I think Lungard's won a couple, Castri's won, obviously F3, and was it Euro F3 as well? I'm not quite sure on that. I
think it was the final Euro Cup winner. He's really
won European F4 as well. So they've got loads of titles in their ranks. Same with Ferrari. But yeah, I think this season on performance, you've got to say that Alpine are the best.
I think to throw another little spanner in the works, they're trying to rank them with Ferrari and Sauber. To be fair, you've got some good drivers in amongst all of it. But in terms of development, as a driver and as a team principal, you kind of want to be in one of those two teams, because again, if we use Giovinazzi as for an example, if he'd been in, and I'm going to keep going on, but if he'd been in Red Bull Driver Academy, you could argue he'd be gone already by now. But they've stuck with him. They've developed. They've worked with them. It's like, okay, we need to. There's some work needs to be done here, but we're not just going to cut and run and replace you with Schwartzman or Armstrong or someone. So from that, and you've got the whole process there. They've got their own kind of Red Bull thing where you could start off in Sauber and you make your way up to Red Bull. You look at Charles Leclerc as the perfect example for that. And you've got a smaller bunch, but they're focusing on developing them, and they're not afraid to take their time with them, as you can see from Sauber keeping the same driver lineup since 2019 in terms of experience and rookies. So then if Kimi does leave this year, then you could have theoretically Giovinazzi staying for one more season to see what it's like up against someone new, be it Pourchaire, be it Ilott or Schwartzman or someone. But again, you've got a couple other people in F3 then to make it up into F2, so that in 2022, if it doesn't work out, if you need to go all rookie, you can go all rookie. So just in terms of that, I feel like you from a driver's perspective, you would prefer that, because you know they'll take their time with you, they'll develop you further. Whereas you'd be worried if you're in Red Bull, because there's just so many of you. The competition just never stops.
Well, let's talk about Red Bull briefly, Fraser. Let's talk at F2 in particular. You are inside F2. I'll call you the F2 expert right now. Vips, Lawson, Daruvula, they're the 3. You had Tsunoda last year, came out the blocks, great guns. His rise to Formula One has been very impressive, somewhat aided, we must say, by Albon's equally quick rise and then very much flew too close to the sun. This year with those three, I think all three of them are solid drivers, but I don't know if I'm going to see any of these in F1. De Ruvela, I thought last year ended the season really well. He hasn't really got the podium in Bahrain, but he hasn't really started the season yet. Are we looking at Red Bull maybe not even taking the second slot in this ranking?
I think so, Jim. Yeah, I think Alpine and Ferrari, if you look at it in terms of drivers, then I'd say they have the strongest drivers right now. I would say, from a driver's perspective, would I want to be in the Red Bull Driver Academy? I don't think I would. I think I'd be looking at how much they do chop and change. I mean, I was reading this morning that Helmut Marko has made Yuki Tsunoda move to Austria. Is that right? To
Italy for Vasser to keep an eye on him.
Yeah, and does that mean Yuki Tsunoda's under a bit of pressure right now? 5 races in, I just think we know how good Yuki Tsunoda is, and we know that he is rapid on his day. I don't think he'll be replaced next season. I don't think he will. But if, for example, Yuri Vips or Liam Lawson really put a championship campaign together in Formula 2, and if they finish in the top 3, for example. Would Helmut Marko say, right, Yuki, if you're not performing, I've had enough, and swap it again? And it's not enough time to prove yourself, is it? You need a season of Formula 1 under your belt before you really start delivering, in my opinion. So it's a brutal academy to be in. Sometimes it works, of course it does. You look at, as you say, Thiemo, you've got Sebastian Vettel, you've got Max Verstappen, who have both been brilliant, and Daniel Ricciardo as well, of course. But is it a driver academy I want to be in right now? No, I don't think so. I think I'd rather be in the Alpine Academy or the Ferrari Academy. And as you say, I think Alpine are in a really, really good position right now. So yeah, I think you're right, Jim. In answer to your question, I don't think Red Bull are in the top 2 academies right now.
I will caveat this by saying that with Lawson and Vips, I'm not saying that they're not good drivers. It's like, this is not going to be their season this year, I don't think. And they've got time that they might be able to jump in next year. But Thiemo, are you in agreement with this, that Red Bull aren't the top academy?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that, because I think, call me an old romantic, but with F1, you kind of expect it, and it's sold to you as these are some of the best drivers on the planet. And obviously you've got to have your first season at some point, so there's going to be some rough edges around it, but you don't want to be chopping and changing so often that year on year. You want some consistency at least to see, because you need a season if you're Yuki, for example, to get up there and get up to speed and everything. If you base Mick Schumacher off this year at Haas, and you think, well, better chop him then because he's having crap.
100%, yeah.
You can't be doing that. So just because it's not performing in a better car, the AlphaTauri is obviously better than the Haas car this year, and if you're then chopping Yuki because of whatever reason you decide to fill in the blank, and you decide to replace him with Vips or Lawson, it's like, nothing against them, they're good drivers, but I don't think they're the complete package yet to make that step up. You want it to feel earned. You don't want to just be there because you bought your way in, or because someone else did bad and you've got someone up higher thinking, well, sod it, we'll just replace you. So it's just, I think Fraser's correct there.
As well as that, Jim, you've got the history of chopping and getting drivers back. I mean, if Dan Ticktum goes and wins the F2 Championship this season, is Dan Ticktum going to be in a Toro and an AlphaTauri even next season? Maybe Antonio Felix da Costa, maybe his chance isn't over yet. Maybe he's going to be called up. I don't know. But
that's exclusive here on Talking F1, where we really do talk F1 with da Costa's in there. Forgo all of his Formula E fun. Ferrari, though, Jacob, it sounds like we're kind of universal, maybe, that they are the second best academy right now. So Schumacher, of course, very talented, still in the academy technically, even though he's already made it to F1. But we've got the same thing with George Russell 3 years in. He's still in the Mercedes Junior program. Ilott, test driver, reserve driver, very strong candidate. Armstrong, Schwartzman and Arthur Leclerc. Ferrari, second best?
Yeah, and I think Street's ahead of Red Bull as well. In fact, I would just say at the moment that I think Red Bull is probably the weakest that Academy's ever been in a long time. You look at the 3 drivers coming up that you've mentioned there, and I don't really see that much. I think Lawson's got a good driver, but it's certainly nothing compared to the likes of, Vettel, Verstappen, Sainz, Ricciardo. The list goes on from the past.
I thought I was doing shots fired.
Yeah.
Go on,
There's
Jacob.
raft of talent there in the Ferrari driver program. Obviously, we've got Schumacher, who's made it up to F1. In my opinion, very, very unlucky, to be there, but obviously money played that part. We've discussed that many times before. You've got Schwartzman, who's been very unlucky at the start of this season, but for me, definitely a championship contender. And I think, like we said with F2 many times, one good weekend in Baku, we can totally turn that around. So for me, yeah, very much so. And another reason you've got to remember as well is the only saving grace for me with the Red Bull Academy is the fact that, there are more seats available. There's, 3 seats realistically. Obviously, Verstappen's going to be there for life, basically, until he gets, until he moves up, maybe up to Mercedes, for example. And I think that's the same thing that steps Ferrari above Alpine as well. Obviously, Alpine don't really have an engine customer deal. That's a very big factor within F1. Maybe they're going to, I've heard rumours of maybe linking up with with Williams, potentially, but I'm not sure very much about that. So, yeah, you've got to think that obviously there's chances at Alfa Romeo and Haas as well. So it's certainly a great academy to be part of.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I would like to say as well that Dennis Hauger right now, I'll do a little plug as well. We've got an interview in the Grandstand interview with Hauger, and he's part of the Red Bull program, but not in the actual junior team right now. I'm not sure of all the ins and outs and how that's working, but he's Red Bull backed, but he's leading the F3 Championship. But yeah, it might be a couple of seasons before really.
5 minutes for someone to cock up, and Marco will just promote him accordingly.
Yeah, bye UK. Hello, Dennis. It's stranger things have happened. I do want to think about the Red Bull then. So where are we placing these? So we're looking at this now. We've got Alpine and Ferrari taking those top 2 spots. 3rd place on the podium in terms of academy stuff. Red Bull, I think we're all in agreement here that it's a great place to be for a driver in terms of they'll back you, because we don't know all the ins and outs stuff, but we know that for Ferrari, we saw with Lacey had to pay to be part of the academy, whereas Red Bull, that's all taken care of. So from a driver's perspective, terrific. In terms of talent right now, though, not the strongest. I think that's something we're all agreeing on. So where are we ranking these? We've also got Williams, Dan Ticktum, Roy Nissany, Jack Aitken, Jamie Chadwick. Thiemo, you mentioned this, Nissany's there, and that's definitely a financial thing, because this is meant to be a junior program, and the guy's 26. Great, got that podium in Monaco, but I do look sometimes at Williams' academy and wonder how much of that is actually money in PR sort of things. I think Jamie Chadwick's a great driver, but I think the first female race winner we'll see in Formula One will be saying Jamie Chadwick was my idol rather than it being Jamie Chadwick. And that's no insult to Jamie Chadwick. It's W Series is making its own strides. We've got Sauber, Theo Pourchaire. He's really arrived. That Monaco victory, that Monaco pole position is definitely fast. And Mercedes junior team, George Russell, Vesti, too early to say really at this point, I think, with how this season's going at least. But Russell, we know he's a known quantity, and a Lewis Hamilton potential successor. So where do Red Bull rank amongst those 4? Where are we going to put those, Fraser?
For me, I think Red Bull still have to go in there in 3rd. I think they've got a strong history of bringing drivers through. And for me, that they do give drivers the opportunity. And that's the one thing that you can't say about Alpine, is that they've never had a driver go from the academy into the team. So, and that's the same with Mercedes. Mercedes, we still haven't seen I know we've got George Russell, and we're expecting it next season. But yeah, so for me, it's still Red Bull. I think Mercedes, it's a difficult one. It's a very small academy. Obviously, put all of their attention on George Russell. Obviously, taking Frederick Resti on as well. So for me, I think it would be Red Bull, Mercedes, then Williams. And I'll be honest with you, I still don't get the Sauber Junior Academy. I get that they are still associated with they're still in Formula One, really, aren't they? But how much of a say do they get in their drivers? I still think Ferrari get a big say on that. And if Ferrari wanted 2 of their drivers in that seat seats next season, I think they would get that. So yeah, for me, it would be Red Bull, Mercedes, Williams, and Sauber in that order. I'm still interested to see whether now Aston Martin are now an independent team. Are they going to set up a driver academy? Are they going to look for a few drivers to potentially join that? Who knows? We'll wait and see. But again, as you already said, we could do this podcast in a year's time and it'd be completely different. So who knows?
Yeah, it's really funny one, isn't it? Because what we need right now is more drivers in junior academies who won't make it. So Aston Martin, please don't. Actually, I can see why you'd want to, but please don't.
Or someone convinced Stroll Senior to make a junior team either in F2 or in F1 and just well, you're already here, you spent some money, come on.
Aston Martin junior team like an AlphaTauri would actually be just what the sport needs.
It was also worth noting, I think, that Jessica Hawkins, they signed her as a development driver, and she's going to be in W Series. So it's just curious, is that all that's going to be, or are they looking for something there? It's hard to know how they're going to handle that one.
It's weird with Jess Hawkins because she's got the tie to Aston Martin because she does stunt driving stuff for James Bond. So I don't know if that, again, was a similar bit of a PR stunt. She seemed to be fast, but didn't seem to be...
If she wasn't in W Series this year, we probably wouldn't be considering it. It's just... You don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. But Jacob, do you want to put Red Bull in third place as well from what we spoke about earlier for the 2021 season?
Yeah, I think, and you've got to look, like Fraser said, at the history as well. So I think, they've got a reputation of being a great driver academy. So I'm putting them third. I'm going to put Mercedes fourth because, with the talent they have, their bestie, I think he will do good things. And Russell, potentially could be the successor of Lewis Hamilton in 12 months' time. So I've got to put them fourth. Then I'm going to put Williams. Williams have got a few interesting talents there. I think I'm actually with you, Jim, on this one. I think Tickton has shown, I think he's really, really matured. Obviously, a few years ago, he got dropped, I think, quite rightfully from the Red Bull program. He was a bit of an idiot. But he has, this season, I think he's really, really proved himself. He picked up a couple of wins last year. So I'm starting to really get behind Tickton. We said enough about Nassani already. For me, that's an absolute money grab. Chadwick, great driver. We need to see some more of her. I'd like to see her in a few, maybe FP1s, for example, in F1. She proved herself last year in the W Series. So I'm going to put them next. And then, the Sauber one's a bit of a weird one. I think Callum Eilert actually used to be part of this Sauber program as well. So they do have a little bit of pedigree, and they used to have some of the, didn't Charouz used to be Sauber junior team or something like that? So I'm sure
were affiliated.
I'm sure they've always had like a junior program there, and then Eilert moved over to Ferrari. So it could be a similar thing like that. Pourchaire might be in there as like in Sauber as like a stepping stone, and then he has a good year this year, which while it looks like he's very much on track to do so, it could be a case of Alpine, Ferrari, or someone else snaps him up. So it could be a good stepping stone. But there's certainly a weird one, the Sauber Academy.
I think it's more of a weird one as well for me that I'm never going to drive a Formula One car. And it's a sad fact, but I am just too tall. That's the only reason. At 6'4", I can't fit in the car. But if it wasn't for that, I'm sure I'd be there with them battling out. But yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because Pourchaire's clearly talented. But if he does make that jump to Formula One and joins Alfa Romeo, Sauber, whatever they'll be called when he makes it, if he makes it, what then? Because Sauber are great, and I love that they're there. And in terms of independence, they are nowhere near that sort of Williams name, and Williams don't exist in the same way now. But they've been there for so long, and it's great to see a team like that who are their own being. They've got a lot of Ferrari affiliation, of course, but I don't know what happens to Pourchaire then. Is he just going to stick in the midfield for the rest of his life? Or you'd imagine he's there, great, thanks guys, I'm going to sod off now because Mercedes are sniffing around. It's a weird, really weird one. So I'm going to have to agree and put Sauber at the bottom, but that's not a representation of Pourchaire's ability, I think. I just think the way it stands, they are a really weird one. Thiemo, how about you? Would you agree with that assessment?
I'm just thinking from what you're saying about Pourchaire that the aim of the Driver Academy is you want to bring these drivers into F1, and then once they're there, it's your job to keep them and to make sure that that you are giving them enough, both in the car and whatever else, to make them stick around for you. So it's why Sauber is an odd one, but I feel like Sauber wouldn't be as annoyed if he stayed with them for a couple of years and then went off to, I don't know, Renault or Aston Martin or someone because they had a better option. It's like everyone at Red Bull was so surprised when Ricciardo jumped ship because they just thought, we've done all this to get you here and now you're just disappearing. But again, if you're not committed enough to the drivers, then once you're in F1, you kind of the loyalty doesn't have to be there as long if you're a good driver, because at that point the money doesn't matter as much, I think, because if you can obviously buy your way into it, but staying there is a different matter. I mean, if we look at Vettel, if we based him just off performance over the last few years rather than his status as a four-time world champion, you would think Aston Martin wouldn't have signed him up last year. So I think once you're in F1, it's all bets are off. So In terms of the driver academies this year, Red Bull third for sure, just because there's so many of them, and they're all good quality in some sense, some better than others, but there's a lot there. I think after that, it's all fairly tricky. I think Mercedes would have to go into fourth. Also worth knowing that Ocon was a part of that, and it's still kind of linked to Mercedes in a way. So it's kind of amusing, but Alpine Academy driver that the person who got your seat potentially wasn't even really in the academy either. They just kind of loaned him off Mercedes and then just kept him. But then I'm going to upset the apple cart a little bit and put Pourchaire and Sauber into the fifth spot, just because I think that as good as the drivers are in Williams in different respects, Aitken, it's annoying because he's a good driver, but we don't know how much of him we're going to see. Jamie as well, because we've got W Series, but again, we can't base that too much yet because it's not started. Nissany was said about, and Ticton, yeah, he's improved, but again, he's been around a while, and I feel like you want to have fresh and cutting edge people on this as much as possible. I know I'm trying to be an idealist about it, but someone's got to. So for that reason, I've got to put them in bottom, just because they seem to just be sticking with the consistency, but there isn't too much development so far.
See, I find the Ticton one that's, with all due respect, Aitken solid enough driver, but again, I'm not expecting him to take a Williams seat and then run with it and be in Formula One in 5 years' time, whereas I think Ticton possibly could be, and he's got, for all of the bad boy antics about it, that could actually do some good PR for Williams, because like the people say that any news is good news, and Ticton would be...
Is that how you want to base your PR? Just any news?
But the thing is, you say that, like, we've got Tsunoda swearing galore, and we've got Steiner, who is the star of Drive to Survive, arguably. But I'm not saying Ticton's like that now. Certainly before, a few years ago, even last year, he's funny with, I've got podium, not really happy about how the car was set up this week, all that sort of stuff. He would create headlines, which could be exactly what Williams need. But I do see the other three as, I'm not really sure in terms of the longevity, what Williams are seeing there. Money
as much as I was faulting Red Bull for stuff, at least they keep bringing fresh faces into it, and they keep progressing people up. So even if you only make it to F1 for 2 races before you get fired, you've made it to F1, you've got to drive in a race car. Whereas the closest any of the Williams drivers have got is practice, or the one thing in Sakir last year for Jack. But again, if Hamilton hadn't got COVID, then that wouldn't have happened. So,
Jim, I think, first of all, Drive to Survive are going to be Dan Ticton's title sponsor, trying to get him into Formula One next season. But for me, if Dan Ticton is one good season, well, it has to be this season, otherwise it won't happen. But if he does well this season, if he finishes in the top 3 this season, maybe even goes on to win the Formula 2 championship, if George Russell is going off to Mercedes next year, like we think he is, then Dan Ticton's the ideal person. I think you're right. You do have to think about PR, and I think Dan Ticton will tick those boxes for Williams. So I think he has a real good shot, probably the best shot on the Formula 2 grid of being in Formula 1 next season.
When Nissany comes in and spoils your show there. Part of me just wants that to happen just to see your reaction for it.
Yeah, you know what, Nissany jumping in FP1, that's fine. I would actually quite like the FIA or Liberty or whoever it is can mandate this to say that your drivers must have a certain amount, and we're talking like 10 or half the season, you should have some of these drivers go into the FP1. That could be something you'd see. Look at Red Bull's academy with so many drivers. If I know you've got super license points and things that you have to consider, but it could be something you'd at least be able to start judging the drivers and how quick they are. It was difficult last year. It was at Nürburgring when we went to see Schumacher and Eilert and everyone have fun in the practice sessions, and we couldn't because of the fog. But those sorts of things shouldn't be a special occasion. I really think we'd love to see these drivers. I'd love to see Daruvala against Tsunoda in an AlphaTauri, setting the times, and if he's within a 10th of a second, you know what, Daruvala, maybe that's somebody who will be sniffing the seat next year. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. But I think right now...
It's interesting to see which teams let the drivers in, like last season, for example, in for odd practice session, or at least they had the intention of putting Nick and Callum in the cars, even though it didn't work out. They were going to do that. And it's interesting that none of that, say, Red Bull or Alpine weren't really even thinking about that. It's like, no, you're in the academy, but that's it.
Alpine do give you a lot of time in the cars, don't they? That's the thing with the sessions. It's 2 years old.
True, but I think there's the visibility of it, though. You have less PR and this kind of thing at a private test session, or even if you advertise during test session, no one really is going to, unless you're really into it like we are, no one's going to pay attention to that on a general basis. But you've seen Nissani in a Williams at a couple of Grand Prix. Love him or hate him, he's got so much more exposure there because it's on an F1 weekend. So it's just interesting to see who prioritizes that.
You know, it's a really good point. But we're going to have to start wrapping this up. And I do think right now we're going to be, ironically, the position that's most under disagreement is the final position. So I think we're all very settled after this load of talking F1. The Alpine for 2021 is probably the strongest academy, followed by Ferrari. Red Bull in third place, possibly because of the sheer number of drivers, with Mercedes nibbling at their heels, if not equal. But that final position, I've listened to everybody here talk, and I do think it's almost a Ticktum versus Porsche rather than Williams versus Sauber. So fifth place, I'm going to go for a vote here, and hopefully we get a 3-1 or a 4-0, because if it's 2-2, I don't know what we're going to do.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Okay, let's do that. Let's see where we go. So Sauber or Williams for that fifth place position, Fraser?
Williams for me.
Jacob?
Williams for me as well.
Thiemo?
I'm going to go for Sauber because if you put Porsche in a car against, I don't know about Chadwick, but if you put him against the other three, he'd beat them. So quality over quantity. But that's just me being annoying. So do what you like.
Well, the thing is, you have to put the casting vote on me. And I do think Porsche is possibly, could be the generational talent we're hoping comes around every now and again. And he is looking really strong. So we're going to have to rock, paper, scissors this, aren't we?
Should we go to a public vote?
You know what? That's a great idea, Jacob. Well, let's do that. So anybody who's still listening at this point, either drop us a message on YouTube just down below in the comments, or when you leave your 5-star glowing review on your podcast service, why don't you just let us know what you think of Porsche or Ticktum?
I'm going to start creating a lot more accounts just to make that in my favour.
Good shout, Thiemo. But yeah, we're going to go with that then. So Sauber Williams, joint fifth place right now, pending what the public think. So gentlemen, I do want to thank you for joining us as we spoke F1 about these driver academies. Thiemo, where can people find more of your work on the internet?
You can find me over on GP Grandstand, of course. You can also find me on Drive Tribe, and if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can at t.albers.daily.drivetribe.
Jacob?
You can obviously find me on GP Grandstand, where we're writing a few previews for this weekend's Baku F2 and F1 rounds. You can also find me on JacobPhil18 on Twitter. And
Fraser, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm over on Inside F2, presenting their podcast, Doing Your Job, Jim. So, you can check them out on social media, or you can check me out on Twitter, Instagram, @_Fraser Ford 1. So,
perfect. We'll have all those things in the show notes or in the description on YouTube if you're watching our lovely faces. And for me, you can find my writing on gpgrandstand.com and fortlock.com. And for my F1 satire news series, the F1 Week That Was, search for that on YouTube. And of course, I'm on Grand Prix Grandstand TV, as well as Talking F1 podcast. So next week, we'll be talking F1 about the Baku Grand Prix, where Formula 2 is back in action after 2 months without. We only have a 2-week break this time. So keep your ears peeled, where we'll be talking F1 all over again.